Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Rory Reid from RoryReidArt.com, and today we have the final installment in our how to paint dark skin tone series, the series that we've been doing over these past 4 weeks. This will be the final part, part 5, and you'll get to see the painting, or the final painting, in all its glory. Before we jump in, I want to ask you guys to follow me on all social media. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. All the links will be down in the description below. And also, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. It really helps me out in the algorithm for, you know, the maximum amount of people to see the video. So go ahead and do that if you will. And without further ado, we're going to jump right in. So for this session, I wanted to start the final stages on the eye. So you see there I mixed up some of my turquoise blue color and started to do some detailing on the upper part of the cornea. So there's a little shadow that is usually at the top if you have your lighting coming from the top down like I do in this painting. So we pay attention to that, we include it, and you know, it's one of those little details that is necessary to make your eyes look realistic. So, and that was part of the goal, one of the goals for this piece. I am going to render the eyes out a bit more than the rest of the painting, so wanted to get a little bit of realism in there. Also, we made the decision as well to match the eyes to the background color that we chose. So those are going to be the, you know, two elements that we include that will give our painting a little bit of uniqueness, if you will. So there we use the white to lighten the mixture when we need to, and then we use our black / ultramarine to darken down. So we're using a lighter mixture here to just touch up the highlighted areas of the white part of the eye. And keep it in mind, as we said in the last part, we're gonna, you know, we're painting these eyeballs as they're spherical in nature, so that will give us the three-dimensionality that we need. The eyes, the nose, and the mouth, or the lips I should say, those are going to be what we're focusing on this part 5. Total painting time for this session was a little bit over 2 hours. I have sped up this video about 25%, so it's going a little bit faster, you know, than real time. But I did this so we can cut down on the length of the YouTube upload. So, and it's not that much faster, so you know, should work out fine. And this is basically all we're doing for the eyes now, to touch them up. As you see on the right eye, I've already dropped in the shadow areas, so it's looking a little bit more three-dimensional already. I included a line right under the top eyelid in shadow there, and then I'm doing that same thing now for the left eye. And that's just step 1. When we start to work on the pupil itself, we're going to include some, you know, highlighted areas on the bottom half of the pupil to match with the, you know, where the light is landing, and then that should round out the pupil as well, or add a three-dimensional value to the pupil as well. And once these eyes you know, get completed, you'll see the portrait sort of come to life. Right now she looks kind of dead in the eyes, if you know what I mean. So we're trying to bring her alive, bring her online, if that makes sense. And the eyes do that. You know, eyes are the windows to the soul. So I usually in my portraits try to spend a little bit extra time on my eyes. Yeah, and everything else in the portrait is looking good so far. But again, we're still at sort of a rudimentary place as far as our color theory go. Right now it's still just brown against the blue background. So once we knock these eyes out, then we're gonna start putting in some slight color variations in the skin, and that'll just, you know, bring a little bit of a punch to the portrait. It's not going to be super bright colors. It's just a little subtle addition that will make the portrait more dynamic, if you will. I'm just using my smaller brushes here, a liner brush and a small pointed round brush, just to get in, you know, the detailed, the finer details of the eye. It's always good to have a wide range of brushes. The smaller brushes you usually use for the detail work. And that's a good way to how I usually structure all my paintings as well. You know, when I start, I use the bigger flat brushes to block everything in, and then once the canvas is sufficiently covered, I like use smaller and smaller brushes when I'm to add details, and it gives me a nice sculpted look, as opposed, you know, so like some people, especially if you follow a lot of oil painters, because the paint they use, the oil paint, is open for a very long time. You see them really just start painting with our super small brushes from the very beginning to get their, you know, photorealistic or realistic look. So me, I don't really do it that way with acrylic paint, because it's kind of a nightmare because the paint dries fast. This is the much preferred way for me. It takes a bit longer, but the end result I like a lot better, because the juxtaposition of the larger blocked in framework underneath works well when you add in the detail layers on top of that. The portrait is much more dynamic, especially when you see it in person. So as far as painting time goes, it is a bit longer, but I like the final aesthetic much more. And you see that right eye now, we're dropping in some of the highlighted areas on the pupil using the same color as the background. And you see we already just put a few brush strokes, and the eye is looking now almost fully three-dimensional just by those few light turquoise blue highlights we've dropped in on the bottom half of the pupil there where the light is falling. Gonna attempt to do that on the left side now as well. I think for this portrait I did leave both eyes sort of bright, just because I enjoyed the sort of strange look that the strange look that it had on the portrait. Normally I'd leave the eye that's in shadow on the left side there. Normally I'd leave that in shadow as well, or at least a little bit duller, and sometimes I even leave it a bit less rendered out as well, you know, a bit less detailed, just to keep focus on the right side. But for this one I rendered it out almost the same, and I did leave the value, you know, similar as well as far as brightness goes. So I like how it looked. It had a shocking, odd look that, you know, brought her to life. So we just dropped in the same highlights on the bottom half of the pupil to round these eyes out as well. Now they look three-dimensional, even though there's a bit more work to go. Keeping in mind as well, we still have not done our ultimate final super bright highlights. We're still just working in the middle of our value spectrum now, so to speak, even though we are on the brighter end. But you know, the brightest value would be pure white. We haven't dropped any pure white highlights in, so you know, we haven't stretched out that spectrum as far as we can go yet. And as far as the super bright highlights, as I said in the last video, we're just going to be doing a few of those, small and subtle, and they'll have a big impact, as you'll see. But yeah, look at our eyes, man. They're already online, so to speak. Same color as the background, so that's a nice tie-in there. Works well together. Yeah, all these different little tricks, you know, serve to bring your painting to life. The idea of doing the light background, dark side of the face, light side of the face, dark background, that checkerboard effect, that works to make the portrait more dynamic, leaving the shadow side less rendered than the highlighted side of the face. That serves to do so as well. Having a wide value range from your darkest dark on the hair area to the lightest part in the highlighted part of the face, that serves to, you know, bring something to the portrait as well. All of these things work together. So when you're painting, you need to take all of that into consideration, and you need to, you know, if you do, you need to plan that out as well. And you can mix and match and, you know, work anywhere in between. This is just one example. I've done portraits where I left the whole thing sort of unrendered out. I've done portraits where I rendered out everything. And, you know, it's whatever you like to do, whatever is most visually pleasing to you, and also to take into consideration what your audience will respond to or like the best. Again now, so we're still on the lighter value side. We're dropping in some highlight dots, like on the bottom of the eyelid there, just to indicate the, you know, the liquid wet feel. Some moisture in the eye, on the eyeball itself. You do those with well-placed highlights. And as you can see, it didn't take a lot of time, you know, just a few elements. We did the shadows first, then we dropped in the highlighted areas on the bottom pupil and the bottom eyelid, and boom, there's a whole three-dimensional value that occurred just with those two steps. And we just repeat that with the left side of the eye as well, or the left eye I should say, not left side. And the lips definitely need more work as well, but that's the whole point of this last painting session. The majority of our time is going to be spent on the eyes, the nose, and the lips. And up until this point, we still have not added any new colors on the palette. And just to show you, well, you see I just sprayed the canvas there to add a bit more moisture back into the paint. This is our last painting session, so everything has dried in already. And as you can see, it just brings back all the richness and the value of the paint. This will give you a similar look, as I said in the last videos. This gives you like a nice preview of how the painting will look once you varnish it. So it's good to work like this with the spray bottle, because you get to see what the final result looks like, you know? Always good. Doing a little bit of cleaning up here on the palette, just to get some more space. And these are the same mixtures I used from the very beginning. So this method, you know, if you're using acrylic, this method is the best, because the paint, all I do is use a glass palette and I spray water as I need to. If I see the paint drying out, I spray water to reactivate the paint. And when I'm storing it overnight, I put a piece of Tupperware on top, and I spray like in the top of the Tupperware and a couple sprays on the paint itself, and then just put a weight on top to weigh it down, and it'll keep the paint, you know, for days on end. So I had about 4 painting sessions, or 5 painting sessions, over about 5 days, and I'm still using the exact paint that I mixed at the very start, acrylic paint. So good way to save paints and make your paints last, so you're not constantly having to remix the paint every so often. Using the clean filbert brush now, and just smoothing out some areas that need to be smoothed out. Focus it on the values even more now, trying to bring them up where they're a bit too dark from our last session. And I'm doing this after I've completed some initial work on the eyes, so we're just letting the eyes dry and set in before we revisit them. And it's the same situation as usual. We're just bouncing around, cleaning up any areas that need to be cleaned up, checking our reference. As you can see, the forehead region that I'm working now on the reference photo, the values are a little bit lighter in these areas, so I'm just slightly bringing them up as well. And just try to match it as close as possible with the least amount of effort, if that makes sense. I'm not painstakingly going in and matching it, but I'm just getting a general gist, because it will read the same, you know, as if I did painstakingly go in and try to match it exactly. It's, you have the same effect as long as you get a general idea going. And our lightness is a little bit different as well, because, you know, we chose to, you know, put our own spin on the eyes. And as I said, we're not, you know, trying to match the lightness exactly, but, you know, you can see, whereas if I did choose just to copy the reference, we'd be in the same ballpark. So when I'm doing like an actual portrait of, like, maybe say for a commission or something like that, I would go ahead and spend time matching it so it looks like the person I'm trying to paint. So But for this, we just decided to have some fun and switch out our background, switch out our eyes for something more cool. And it already looks amazing so far, man. Once you put those eyes in, really comes to life. My focus now sort of switches to trying to stretch the highlights out a bit on the spectrum to add a bit more value range, you know, as far as I can stretch it without it looking tacky. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just bringing up the values or the lighter values in these certain areas and then just blending them in. I put the actual color from the palette onto the painting, then I use a brush and sort of blend them down into the painting a bit, and that'll decrease the, you know, actual value down just a notch, as you can see me doing here. Bring it and drop it, I put it on, and then I'm dropping it down into the painting, and it sort of just blends right in. And we're just smoothing out these areas that we, you know, want to render out fully. You don't want to get everything too smooth. You definitely want to leave some brush strokes in. So when you see me use the clean filbert brush to blend, I'm very lightly just touching the canvas and doing just a small initial blend. That's it. Now I get my red paint out. This is the first new color we're going to add to the canvas. I just do one drop there because we don't need a lot. We're just going to, you know, tone some areas. That's it. Or if you want to call it a wash, you could do that. That's what we're going to do. But also using some Dioxazine Purple. Sort of a cool purple value, and what I'm going to use that for is adding some purple hues in the shadow area, like on the left side of the neck, under the chin, that sort of thing. We're just going to tone our deep shadows that's on the figure itself. We're going to tone those with a purple hue. It's going to be a subtle change that you're probably not even going to recognize, but you know, when you see the painting in person, if any of you ever do, your eyes will be able to pick it up, even though the camera might not pick it up. But it's going to be very light. So I'm just using some titanium white now, mixing that in with our warm red. Get a nice pinkish color there. And then grabbing a drop of our brown mixture just to give it sort of a natural look. And we're going to touch did a couple sprays there just to moisturize the canvas, and we're going to bring that pinkish brown color into some of the warmer areas of the face. And as you can see there, I just did about 3 brush strokes and it's already looks nice and alive, a little bit warmer. It's not just a pure brown on the canvas anymore. So we do now a darker value of the brown, and we're warming it up with our red. And we're going to work some of the mid-tone areas as well with this warmer brown color. Around, as I said, in the areas of the face that have a bit more blood showing through, like the nose and the cheeks, that's basically where we're touching. And it's very slight. You probably can't even notice it too much. But if you look at the right cheek that I just did with the pinkish color, you can see the pink hue on it, and it does make a difference. Especially when it bounces against the blue in the eyes. Very nice. And this is how you like mix up the colors in the face, so you just don't have one flat brown color slapped against your background. You know, it's add a little bit of dynamic range in your colors. Same pink color we're using here again. Just slight touches to glaze over the top. Just to warm up the cheek and the nose. Using a small round brush now with a point to do a little detailed blend, making sure the colors we just added are blended right in to our existing painting. Using our pink color as well now to add some warmth in the lips, and we're just dragging some slight brush strokes of this in where necessary. If you put too much paint on, you can just use your finger to remove it. And we're just warming up this lip area just to get it a bit closer to the reference photo. Very slight, it's a very slight color shift. And now we're using some of the darker value and just gonna refine the shadow areas a bit, or not shadow but mid-tone areas a bit. Add in some drops of white here, and when you mix, be sure to do this, man. Colors like white and reds and black, they're very powerful, you know. So when you're trying to tint or tone colors, you just need a tiny drop. Don't put a glob on your brush and then mix it, because you'll have massive color shifts that you don't really want. You just want a tiny drop. If you could get one drop on one brush hair, that would be perfect. And that's how you incrementally change the hue. So just dropping in back some of the mid-tones now, making sure to keep our, you know, three-dimensionality, because the value changes are how you accomplish that. So we're making sure to, when we go over it with the highlighted, the super highlighted areas, we make sure we go back and drop in some of the darker mid-tone areas just to keep our shape. And you can see that pink is really noticeable now, the pink against the brown right there on the cheek. We drop some in the forehead, on the upper lip a little bit, really showing through. If you have a trained eye, you can see it. And now we sort of try to work that highlight on the bulb of the nose a bit. Just dropped in 2 dabs with the flat brush, and then we're going to use a smaller pointed round brush to like blend that out into the circular shape that you can see on the reference photos. And that's just one technique, or one way you can execute that. Could just use a round brush to begin with, but you know, do whatever you like. And again, the brightest highlights have not been put in yet, so right now you know, we're gonna save those till towards the end a little bit, and once those are dropped in, it'll, you know, bring even more life to the piece. All the areas that, you know, are a bit more oily on the skin, like the bulb of the nose, the forehead. Looks like she's wearing lip gloss, so we're going to include those super bright highlights on the lip as well, and that'll give it a nice sheen effect. Taking some of our brown color now in the mid-tone area and trying to drop in that Rembrandt triangle highlighted area there, just to give it a slightly more natural look. Using our finger to sort out any areas that we need to, and then we take our filbert brush and we blend out. Remember, this filbert brush is completely clean, there's no paint on it. It's used strictly just for blending at this stage. Like we mix our glaze or our, you know, detail colors that we need, we put them on the canvas, then we use the clean filbert brush to blend them into the painting, blend them down into the paint that's already on the canvas. And we're just making micro brush strokes at this point. See, we just did this Rembrandt triangle area, and it jumped up the sort of value detail in the shadow side of the face. Looks great in my opinion. Yeah, we're just cleaning things up slightly. As I said a million times so far, we're going to leave this shadow side of the face not fully rendered out, but we do just bring it up to a decent level. We want that contrast of light and dark, as well as fully detailed and not fully detailed. Two different spectrums that we, you know, we make them work together to add some dynamic value to the portrait. Balance, if you will. Doing a little bit of touch up on the neck as well. Mainly just a slight bump in value. As you can see in the reference photo, the value is sort of similar to the right side of the face, so I didn't want to make them the exact same, but I am going to bring them up slightly, because as I said, I want everybody's eye to focus on the right side of the face. Everywhere else is just a complement to that area. So we're not gonna bring the highlights all the way up. We're just gonna bring them up slightly from where they are now. We grabbed some of our warm mixture as well, with the red included, the brown and the red. And we're doing some touching up on the lips now to match those values a bit more. So I just dropped a few brush strokes in there, then I'm using the corner of this small flat brush to just blend them in. Grabbing a drop of white to lighten it up a bit, and we're going to attempt to match the lip a bit more as far as the value is concerned, you know. So this is where we begin our initial lip work as far as the detailing goes, to sort of finalize our lasting look that we'll leave when we complete the portrait. For those of you who were paying attention, you would have noticed that it was way too dark this whole time. So now we're getting to the nitty-gritty. Final brush stroke details, final value details. So here we attempt to do our initial work on the brightest values, like our brightest highlights. So I did the one on the top of the lip there already, and that's just an initial drop in. It's not the final bright value. You want to build up your highlights as well with underlying value ranges. So right now this is just step one. I'm going to go even brighter than this, and how can I explain this? I'm using this flat pointed round brush. I have a bright value that's brighter than anything on the canvas so far, and I'm going to drop in the initial shape of the highlights with this value. Then as I go into more detail, I'm going to use even a smaller brush, probably even the liner brush, and I'm going to mix a value that's even brighter than this one, and I'm going to go in with maybe one thin line in the middle of this shape, or if it's a circular shape, I just do one dot of the super bright highlight, and it'll give the highlight itself some three-dimensionality, if that makes sense. So this value you see me putting, the values you see me putting on here, these are just step one in the highlight. So all of these things is what you have to pay attention to if you want your portraits to jump up a notch. And again, there are multiple ways of executing this kind of stuff. This is just how I do it. And if you have a it's always best to work from life or from a super detailed photo. This photo I'm using is HD, so I was able to zoom all the way in to grab some of the highlight shapes and just sort of generally mimic them on the painting. Now I'm moving into the bulb of the nose there to do the initial work there as well. I just put the general shape in, moving into the lip area, upper lip area as well, dropping in some minor lines and dots. That's really all I'm doing now with the brush. Just one line here, one line there. You're not trying to overdo it. I'm gonna spray the canvas now to keep those areas we just included active, and then we're gonna take a small brush and just blend them in slightly on the outer edges of the brush stroke. So just gradually blending them in so that it looks natural. And as I said before, whenever I put in a brush stroke, I usually just blend the outer edges of that brush stroke. If you're, if you can understand what I mean. So I'm not blending in the middle of the brush stroke, I'm blending the outer edges into whatever I already have on the canvas. So. And you see I just did that to the top lip, and that highlight there now becomes a bit more natural looking as opposed to just a regular brush stroke. And we're going to do those for all of these highlights that we've done, and then we're going to go back, mix a brighter color, and drop some final spots of an even brighter value in to make the highlight sort of jump off the canvas. Now we're going to do blending on this highlight on the nose here as well. Just sticking to the outer edges, if you can see. Just fading away those outer edges of this, and look at that. A few strokes and it's a lot more natural looking now. Adding some more paint just to reshape a bit. Using the reference photo, as a guide. Right on the bridge, the top of the bridge here of the nose. All the areas in the reference photo that have this super bright area we're doing. Dropping a few on the bottom eyelid here as well of this bright color, this highlight color. On the upper eyelid as well. These are super minor brush strokes. If you could zoom in, you'd see just one line or one dot, that kind of thing. Adding a couple into the shadow eye as well. And as you can see, I haven't really done anything to the hair. The background is still the neck and upper torso area is still meh. But because the face is rendered out fully on that right side, and the eyes and the nose and the lips, you don't even notice it. It just works well, especially when you step back away from the canvas. Your brain and your eyes all just fix all this stuff, so it just works well together. Some more work on the lips here. We have our pinkish tone still in, and we're just warming up any areas that need to be warmed up in the lips. So this is the same brown color we had initially with our raw umber and our Cad Orange and a Cad Yellow, and then we're just adding more red into it to push it over to the red side slightly. So all the subtle colors that are working in the midtones and the highlighted areas are the raw umber base color. We mixed those with the orange, the Cad Orange, and our Cad Yellow. So in the general midtone areas, you have a sort of slight orange tint going. Then when we got to the end, we added our warm red color and we mixed that in to push that brown color from orange to red. And we included those in the warm areas of the face. So on the lips now, the nose, the cheek, all of those are working together. And in addition to that, we had some of that pink color that we mixed as well. So you're seeing the browns against reds, against oranges, yellows, pinks. And they're all done very subtly. They're none of them are jumping out at you. They're all just meshed well together. Just mixing up a little brighter value here as well. Just gonna touch this upper cheek area just to bring the value back up a little bit. And at this detail phase, again, just simple brush strokes. One line here, one line there. We blend if we need to. You paying attention if it looks natural or not. That kind of thing. We're just fine tuning. Added a little bit of highlight color here on the chin as well. As you can see in the reference order, there is a section on the right side there that is catching some more light than some of the other areas, so we're just going to drop those in with 1 or 2 brush strokes. Right side of the lip as well there. A little bit too bright, so we dab some paint off with our finger. Lip area as well, the bottom lip, drop those in, a couple brush strokes, that's all we need. And when we add this lighter value, that's what's, making the painting look way more dynamic. It's stretching out that value range. Like, look how it looks now that I just sprayed it. It's, jumping off the canvas. It's beautiful. So all of these things are things you got to think about when you're painting. It's, a lot of practice, a lot of study, and a lot of creativity, imagination as well. That's why I advised you guys to plan out what you're doing ahead of time, even 75-80%. Just plan that much out and then leave 20% to your own spontaneous, creativity. That's a good place to start. If you can plan everything out, that'd be the greatest, because that way you'll spend the least amount of time painting because you know what you're doing. But me personally, I like to plan out, like I said, about 75-80%, maybe even less. But again, you do run into danger doing that, because sometimes your idea might not work out. Then you're going to end up getting stuck and having your painting on the wall for months on end trying to figure out how you want to move forward, that kind of thing. So to avoid that, proper planning is needed. And once you have your proper planning done, you can just move right through the painting because you already know what you need to do where, and you avoid any major mistakes. With these last few lighter values we've put in, everything now looks completely, like the right side of the face looks like striking, The values are way more closer now to the reference, but they're not overdone. Like if you look in the reference photo, the value on the forehead on the right side there is still a bit more brighter than what I have on the painting. And things like that you have to pay attention to, and I like it where it is now visually on the painting, so I may not even bring it up any more than this. Like I said, the reference photo is just a guide. You don't necessarily have to follow it exactly. If the painting is reading well, you can leave whatever you have at the moment. Grabbing some darker values now. Slight brush strokes to drop those in. Just defining the planes out a bit, using the filbert brush now to blend that in. Not too much, of course, like we said. Still want to leave our sharp brush strokes in the shadow side to give us a nice contrast with the smooth textures on the right side of the face. And now I mixed up some slightly brighter mid-tone value here to drop on this shadow eye, because I did notice in the reference photo there was a value change between the section I'm touching now and the absolute left side, if that makes sense. So I was just slightly indicating those, because any sort of slight value change in the shadow area will have like a nice effect. So I'm just indicating these planes as subtly as I possibly can without going too far in detail, you know what I'm saying? And this is just, just a personal decision, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. On another painting I might not even do this, but when you get in a groove, you just start, doing things, trying things out, testing, seeing how it works. I like the idea of just suggesting the values slightly, so in the shadow side, so that's what I did for this. What I'm doing now is I'm mixing up some of that background color. Remember, it's the turquoise blue / turquoise greenish color, some ultramarines, drop of black, And then I use the white to lighten it up. And I'm just going to add in some abstractions, build a little bit of atmosphere now with this mixture. What I'm doing with this smaller brush is I'm grabbing some of that purple, the Dioxazine Purple, touch of the Ultramarine Blue to cool it down even more. And if you don't have ultramarine, you can even use like a cobalt blue. You'll get a different hue as well, but you know, it doesn't really matter. Either one looks great. And I'm dropping just some slight brush strokes of this purple bluish mixture into the super dark shadow areas of the face. As I said, we're gonna give these shadow areas a purplish tint. It's gonna work well with the reds and the pinks on the lighter value side of the face. Dropping in that purple color on the eyebrow as well. And as I said, you can't even really notice it. It's very subtle. But your eye in person, you'll be able to pick it up. Spraying the canvas now, and then we're going to use our clean brush eventually to blend these in as to not have them stand out too much. You know, you want them all blended in nicely so they work well together. And here we take the clean filbert brush and we just blend them in slightly. All the areas we touched. Blend them in, blend them in. Get a nice, smooth, natural blend. Especially after you mist the canvas with the water, the paint will flow nicely. Areas where we need more paint, we go back to the palette, grab some paint, wash it in. And you see when we drop these subtle colors in on the brown structure, it just makes everything look a million times better. So before we got to this stage in part 5 of the series, you know, we just had the brown color on top of the brown color, on top of the blue background color. Now we've introduced some pinks, some reds, some purples, and some of those ultramarine blues and stuff in the eyes and different areas. So now we have a nice color range or a color scheme. Somewhat analogous color scheme, if you will. You know, with our purples, reds, blues. And you could do any sort of color scheme with this. You know, you could even just keep it complementary with the bluish background. You could just stick to orange on the figure in the shadow area and then do some blue highlights on the highlight side of the face, that kind of thing. You could, you know, play with it any way you want to play with it. Some reds and greens instead. Change the background color. Purple and yellow, you know, different complementary color mixtures. That's the beauty of learning color theory. You know, it gives you an infinite amount of options. There's many different color schemes you can use: analogous, complementary, split complementary, you know, all kinds of. Just look it up. Just go look up a color chart and you'll have all the different options laid out on a color chart there for you, and you can just pick one to use. I already use this type of color scheme in most of my paintings, so just, you know, I just stuck with it for this one. This orange slash turquoise blue is my thing, so that's what we used. Still working the purples into all these little shadow areas now, just giving us a slight tint from the raw umber mix. Just leaning the painting forward there so I can get a better judgment on the values that I have on the canvas. I do paint under a spotlight sort of, so sometimes a little bit of glare affects the canvas, so leaning it forward like that helps me to get the glare off the canvas and see the you know, true colors that are on the canvas. If you paint in the daytime, that's not much of an issue for you, but I usually paint at night under a light, so I have to take precautions to make sure that, you know, what I'm seeing on my palette and on my canvas are accurate. And so if we're going for more of a lightness match, we would correct the shape of the lips a little bit, because that seems a little bit off from the reference photo. So we put some work in there, especially in the corners of the mouth there, the corners of the lips, they have like a downward slope. We would fix that, and we'll just match the values and color of the eye. And that would bring us right back to, you know, matching the value of, matching the likeness of the reference photo, as well as working the hairline a bit more as well. So we're in the ballpark, as I said. But again, we're just worried about the skin tone and, you know, just how to generally make your portraits more professional looking, as far as, you know, getting some realism in there and making your skin tones look vibrant and lively, as opposed to drab and dead. So that's the main takeaway you should get from this 5-part series. Still taking that purple mixture now, and I'm going into the shadow areas of the eyeball itself. So dropping those into the center of the pupil. And again, you might not think that this makes a difference, but using a dark value of a specific color is much more effective than just using pure black, because in person your eyes will be able to pick these subtle color changes up. So I rarely ever use pure black. I'll just take any color and just drop that color down all the way right before black, if that makes sense. And I use that for my shadow areas, or for my shadow color. So even in the dark areas you're seeing on the canvas now, like in the hair, that's not really black. It's blue, the turquoise blue color that you see on the left side of the background. It's that color dropped all the way down right before I get to pure black. Because a lot of times when you use black right out of the tube, it gives a completely flat look. If you're looking like at the hair I have now on the right side, the bottom right half or bottom right section of the canvas, you see it has a super deep effect. It doesn't look dried out and flat like you'd normally see when you use just pure black. So it's basically just super dark blue is what you're looking at, not black itself. Cleaning up all these areas now and just defining the planes a bit more, matching values, blending where it needs to be blended. And we're just gonna follow this train until we get to the end of the painting. We're in the home stretch now. By this time now, our eyes would have, been set into the canvas a bit more, so we can revisit. Even though we've been touching it this whole time, we can revisit and now add in some more layers on top. I mean, they're largely done, don't get me wrong, but I'm still gonna drop in some different tones. I'm gonna put even some of those pink, that pink value that I put on the cheek and the nose earlier. I'm gonna drop a couple brush strokes of that in very subtly, and when you layer colors on top of each other like that, it really works well together. So I'm gonna do that, and it's gonna give the eyes even a more dynamic look that it has right now, and it's gonna tie everything in. It's gonna tie like it's gonna, your eyes are gonna pick up the pink value on the nose and the cheek, and it's gonna tie in with the eyes. And then your eyes are gonna pick up the blue values in the background, and that's gonna tie in with the blue values in the eyes. And you're gonna pick up the purple values in the shadows, and that's gonna tie in with the purple shadow areas of the eyes. All of that stuff works in concert together. I think I'm doing like some minor brush strokes now on the eyebrows because they still look a bit unnatural. All I'm gonna do, like I said, I didn't want to focus on all of this auxiliary stuff like eyebrows, ears, hair, neck, torso, that kind of stuff. So I'm just dropping in these shapes and making slight value changes as accurate to the reference photo as I can, and just stopping there. That's all I'm doing for these auxiliary elements of the face. Because the star of the show, as we said, is eyes, nose, mouth. So just using the liner brush and putting some directional brush strokes in according to how the eyebrow hair is flowing. Super slight, not, you know, doing any super detailed stuff, just a general area brushstroke. So now we are revisiting that color that we mixed earlier from the background, just to add in some random texture and abstractions to sort of engulf our figure, to immerse her more into the atmosphere of, you know, what we're, of the, you know, the area that we created. And we're just dropping those in. Put it in there. Just took some of the paint off with this side of my hand. And these, I love these abstractions. They sort of let you know it's a painting. It takes away a bit from the realism of the piece, and, you know, just a fun element. Sort of like you can see the atmosphere moving around her. Very calculated brushstrokes as well. You have to, you know, sort of think about how it's going to read before you put it on the canvas. It's like that one there, wasn't too much of a fan of, so just removed it and leave like the subtle imprint of it still there. But as far as the full punch of the color we mixed, we leave that off. And just dropping them in wherever we see fit. This is the same background color with this specific value. And we're not going to do too much, you know, we're not going to cover too much of the face. Slight touches there, didn't like that, so we dab some of it off, make it more subtle. Good enough. And adds a really beautiful element. You can even, you know, play with the hue of the hue of the color in this step. You could probably put in some of the pinkish color here instead, or, you know, orange, whatever works. I just chose to keep it the same, so. Because when I paint, I stick more on the subtle side of things as opposed to the bold color variances. And now we have a color that's almost pure white, and we're going to go back in and drop in those final dot and line super bright highlights that we spoke about earlier, to just round out the piece and put the last final touches on all the previous highlighted areas that we worked on earlier, if you recall. So as you can see here, I'm taking white, and it's just a tiny dab of our blue color, so that it's not absolutely pure white, but very close, and that's what we're using. You want to have that slight drop of blue into this white mixture, because the pure white itself is gonna appear very unnatural. So, you know, it's gonna look out of place. So when you tint it with a slight drop of the blue to take off the full effect of the pure white, you get a more natural highlight color. And we're just gonna add these few minor strokes in where we need them to, on the pupils themselves, trying to mimic them on the reference photo as best we can, always checking to see if it reads well in the painting or not. There, we're going to drop in one little dot there on the nose. We're dropping it on top of the mixture, the foundation we already laid from before. And now we move to the lips, dropping in a couple dots. Very subtle. Now the upper lip. Just one thin line in between the foundation we already laid before. Putting another couple lines, or just, going over what we already touched before on the nose, on the bridge here as well. Just a couple lines, couple dots. Bottom of the eye here now, just a couple random dots in. Darkened it back down a bit now with our blue color. And we're going to touch our area, just redefining out some of our mid-tone shadow areas here on the eyeball. Grab some white now to bring it back up more again. And we're gonna hit the corner right here to really pop out that three-dimensionality. Putting a highlight glaze on the bottom of the top lip, just to indicate that lip gloss she has. We're still using the slightly darker value now. We still don't have the brightest value that we just used to finalize the highlights. We're back down to the more subtle dull color, so that's what we're using right now, and just mimicking some of the lip gloss areas with different values here and there. Grabbing a drop of white. Almost fully pure white now, and just again slight dots. Just to stretch out that value range. And as you can tell, we're getting very close to the end now. Not really much left to do. Painting looks spectacular. When I posted this on my social media, it got, by far one of the most excited responses that I've received in a while. People really seem to love this one, and yeah, it's actually already found a new home, so only prints are available of this piece. It was an 8x10 canvas panel, so I have 8x10 prints available in my store, link down below if you want a copy of this piece. And what I did now is I took some of the background turquoise blue color with white, and I'm putting in now some final white brush strokes, very lightly done, on top of everything we've done so far. We're including these cool highlights as the final touch to contrast with the warm pinks, reds, oranges, and browns that we've had on the face before. And this is going to be our final step to get our super punch effect on our portrait here. This just brings it full circle, you know, these cool highlights sort of finalizes her in the cool atmosphere coming from the cool light source, which is that background color, the turquoise blue mixture. And these final blue highlights just very subtly indicates that she's in this atmosphere or in this environment. And we put them on with a very light brush stroke. We're just touching the brush to the canvas and dragging it across very lightly, almost no pressure. We're letting the canvas pull the paint out of the brush, and then once we do that, we, you know, spray the canvas, blend them in to drop down the value so it's not standing out too much, and that's it. Few lines here and there now of this bright color. We put those few bright lines on top of the more subtle ones we've done before, and they all work in concert together. You got to build up your shadows, you got to build up your midtones, you got to build up your highlights. Everything is sort of in a range, you know. Spray the canvas there to keep the paint wet, and now we're using the clean filbert brush again, blending it in so it appears more natural where we want it to. But yeah, everything is a range. From the rendering process, you know, you leave some areas unrendered and some areas you render out fully. That's a range. Some areas you leave dark. Some areas you leave super bright. That's another range. And you do that with every element of the painting. So if I'm working a shadow, I have a range within that shadow. If I'm working a highlight, I have a range within that highlight. If I'm trying to execute a particular form or plane, I do that with a value change or range. That's basically all I'm doing here. As you can see now, it's a very striking portrait. Just maybe 1.5 hours from where we were when we started this section. She's completely come alive. Looks amazing. Super cool. Just checking, last minute checking on the values here again as well. And I think at this point I was completely happy with where it was and decided to leave it, you know, here. So we're winding down now. Portrait is all but complete. Hopefully you guys got some sort of value from this series. If you're, you know, painting dark skin tones, It is sort of tricky working in the shadow areas, but again, that's why you have the palette or a workable palette with a system. I have all my values that I started with still on the palette, and I trust those to guide me, as well as using my eyes to guide me as you move and meander through the portrait itself. So, you know, just the final touches here and there that's left. I'm gonna not really include all of those because this is what the painting looks like at the present moment, and where I left it I just cleaned up a little bit here and there, and I'm gonna show you the final product coming up here shortly. But again, I will be releasing the full time lapse of this piece coming up next weekend, maybe Friday or Saturday, depending on the time. And in that, I'll discuss some of my final thoughts on the piece, talk about what I could improve, talk about different things you could have done in the painting, portrait, so on and so forth. So here is where we left the portrait. It is titled Daughter of Sarai, and as I said, this piece has already found a home. So if you're interested in any prints of this piece, the store will be linked in the description below. You can check that out. Loved how it turned out. It's an 8x10 on canvas panel. And again, guys, if you're interested in any merch, go ahead and check out my Teespring store. That is linked in the description as well. Also, be sure to follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and the like. All links in the description. And lastly, if you're interested in any prints or originals, check the store link below. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, guys, God bless you all. Take it easy. Peace.